Ready? Okay, here we go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this great special edition of Rising Tide, where we will be talking about our predictions, about whether we were right back in December when we started our 2024 predictions, and then what we've seen happen in the current trends that are around and kind of what we think is going to happen the rest of the year. We're super happy you could join us today. My name's Lisa Bowen. I'm the Chief People Officer with Full Course. And Full Course is the industry's first and only incubator, accelerator, and investor for emerging food brands. We do have contact information to book a call with us at the end of the webinar if you want to learn more about what we do for the industry through our education, mentorship, and investment. So I'm joined today by much of the Full Course team. So I'd like to go through the introductions really quickly. And as I introduce you, like wave or something so that everybody knows who you are. First of all, we've got Lauren Fernandez, the CEO, founder, and empress of Full Course. She is the sticky glue that holds us all together. We've got James Kaler, who's our Chief Operating Officer and brings his encyclopedic knowledge of all things restaurant operations. We have Aaron Wentang. Aaron is our Director of Learning and Leadership Development and knows all things people. And then Paul Craythorne, he is our Director of Ops Services and really kind of our little Swiss Army knife. Paul's done a little bit of everything and he brings a ton of knowledge to our team. So we're super excited to have everybody here today. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A section. We will get to them either as we go through, if it is a question that makes sense for us to answer at that time, or we'll come back around to it at the end. Anything that we share, if we share a website or something like that, we'll drop it in the chat for you, just so that you'll have that. So let's jump in, everybody. We'll go to the next slide, which I think is about people. So back in December, our prediction for people was retention is the new sexy. So this was our prediction in December. And frankly, I'm still bullish on high performing teams being the difference maker in our industry. Labor right now, we know that there are going to be some fluctuations, probably continued rising wages. There's going to be a lot of stiff competition for talent still. In a lot of markets, somebody we're working with right now has less than 2% unemployment in their market. So there's always going to be a stiff competition for the best and brightest. But there are also some new rules that are kind of coming around the bend with regards to overtime exemptions and new minimum wages that are really going to put some added pressure on what we see happening in our industry. So just be prepared for labor to be a little bit unpredictable. But if I were going to lean on the edge of predicting, I'd say it's going to go up. So how do we start to manage that and solve for it? Again, I'm going to focus on retention, but everybody who knows me knows that this is going to be the case with me. I still think it is the new sexy. And I think smart hiring, onboarding, effective training, career pathing, and professional and personal development. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I like to think of. And I've been on this soapbox for a couple of years now around innovative benefits, rewards, and incentives. I really think that with the generation of workers and the largest growing generation of workers in the restaurant industry is age 16 to 19, and a huge, 70% of restaurant workers are under the age of 35. So I think that we really have to focus on what do they need from an employer and what's going to be exciting for them. Creating cultures where people feel valued and where they love to work. So that's going to be that focus on retention is going to be a really, really big strategy to solving for some of the labor pressures. I do think technology is great. I think it needs to be used wisely when it comes to people, because I do still think particularly fast casual service and fine dining, upscale dining, I do think the human factor is critically important. So use technology where the guests won't miss as much of the human interactions. So I'll give you an example. One of the fast casuals that I'm really familiar with uses a QR code at the table to order instead of waiting in line at the queue at the counter. The team member still delivers the food. So I'm satisfied with my interaction with a human, and I need that in my dining experience. And I don't miss ordering at the counter. I can go ahead and order and I can get that done, and I still get to have the interaction. So be thinking about that. I think from a retention standpoint, cross training is key to delivering best in class guest experiences. It also helps to control labor, since high quality employees with tenure who are cross trained are generally going to be more productive, and they're going to help you get exceptional results. Your people are still the key to KPIs like sales, guest satisfaction, employee engagement. And I would even, and James, you can jump in here if you care to, or Paul, any of the operator folks. I think even things like food cost can be very, very much managed. Linens, paper goods, all of that is going to improve when you have high quality team members. James, any thoughts on that?
No, I agree with what you're saying. I think there's been such a huge push towards really trying to automate stuff and bring in as much technology to help curb some of the labor strain. But, the retention aspect of it, I think is hugely important. We're not replacing, per se, a lot of jobs with the automations. There still needs to be someone behind it, either doing prompting, if you're using some AI generation stuff, or if you're using it in regards to order kiosks or even drive-through kiosks and the order taking there. But, going back to the human element, when you look at trying to perform like stay interviews and really trying to involve your team, it's not just the function of going through that and reaching out to them and talking to them. It's actually taking the information and then utilizing what the feedback is to help improve upon what they're giving you feedback on. And I think if they're taking the time to do that, there's a value there that can be very easily wasted. So
yeah,
it's not just saying you're going to do something. It's actually, putting, for lack of a better term, action to where what you're gathering is actually going to make an effect on the working environment, or if it is wages on wages, or if it's on, new equipment or, development, whatever it might be. But really take those to heart. Don't let them just sit in a file folder somewhere.
Amen. And Erin actually probably could speak to this a little tiny bit, because she's our survey guru. But if you're going to ask people a question and they're going to take the time to answer, then you have to acknowledge that you've heard it. Erin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that anytime, especially how sensitive we all are with our time, I think, there's so many knowledge grabs going on where people are trying to get information from you. So you're going to have to do something to stick out. And also, I've noticed recently, I've taken some surveys, and, you want to provide feedback for places you've had good, or maybe some service that could be improved. And I think a lot of them are missing the purpose. Sometimes I'm confused on why I'm taking the survey. I think there's a miss there where we don't always communicate I'm happy to help give you data. I'm happy to give you feedback, but sometimes it ends up being an hour-long process that I did not sign up for during my 5 minutes I had to take the survey. So I think really considering the survey taker is something that many miss out on.
I agree with that. And Lauren, I know I'm getting ready to talk about innovative benefits. And I happen to know that you have a little bit of an anecdote about not asking the question and what happened when you did. So why don't maybe share that?
Sure. You're going to make me drag this story out all the time, aren't you? Because it's mortifying, but I think I'm willing to share it because I think it highlights the importance of not making any assumptions about what your employees are going through at any given moment. And this was a few years back when healthcare was all the rage for, especially in the restaurant industry. And there was a lot of press and media around restaurants not offering healthcare, and this was in and around the Obama administration and after. And what I made the assumption that for our almost 500 employees, that offering healthcare would be viewed as a really positive benefit, and went to great lengths to get the budget for it, to find the right vendors, to make sure we had the minimum amount of subscribers, et cetera. And we go, and we'd been talking to them about this like a lot, like it's coming, here it comes. We roll it out, including on-site interviews and onboarding, where an actual representative came to the restaurant between the hours of, like, I think 2 and 4 between shifts, to onboard employees. And much to my chagrin of I think at that time, I think we had an employee count of near 450-ish. I think we had like 5 people in the store sign up, 7 if you counted a couple of corporate employees. And it was a mortifying fail. I have no shame in admitting that. And when we kind of peeled back the layers of the onion and asked a couple of trusted employees why people weren't signing up, I think a lot of them were on other types of benefits, and they were concerned that receiving that benefit would impact their other benefits they were receiving from both state or federal, whatever the case may be, or maybe they had a better plan through their spouse or partner. And I think that we just fed into a lot of what we were hearing and didn't check and temp check with our employees, which was a huge mistake. What I learned from that and what we did to correct was we immediately went back to them and said, we messed up. Like, you clearly did not need this or want it, but we have budget and we are committed to spending it to your benefit, period, full stop. So to help us understand what that looks like. And we gave them a number of options as we were brainstorming, because at the time, this was again like 2016, like there weren't a lot of non-traditional benefits out there. And we were committed to being innovative in that way. So we were making the list, and we left a big open space for like, just tell us what you want. And that was the winner. It wasn't actually any of the cool things that we thought we had come up with. Up to and including financing transport for them. That wasn't a thing either. I mean, we were missing it big time. And the number one overwhelming response was paid time off. And that was coming from our hourly employees. So we turned it into an amazing benefit for them. We turned it into a retention strategy for us, and we spent the money on that. And I think the second winner was telehealth for mental health and for just general purposes, which worked with anyone's insurance. It didn't matter who your insurance carrier was. You could call up, and we covered them. And I think at the time it was something like $12 a month, and then another $8 for the psychological benefit, for the therapy benefit. And it's gone down since then. But the moral of the story there is make zero assumptions. And if you can empower your employees through a number of different benefits platforms that exist now to make those choices for them, you get even a more personalized experience for them on what their benefits can look like, which I think we use the example all the time. To a 19-year-old in a restaurant, they don't care if you're matching a 401k. They don't even know what that is, right? So, but they do care that you're offsetting their gym membership if they can elect that, or paying for their gas, like paying for school, like using that towards tuition. Like there's a number of different things that you can do, fortunately now, that I think customize benefits for the individual employee.
I couldn't agree more. And that's probably where, before I hand off to Erin to talk a little bit about training trends, say that fast 3 times, and the things that she's observing in training. I do want to talk briefly about kind of, I guess it's a combination of gamifying some of the behaviors that you want with innovative incentives and rewards. So there are some companies out there now, there are a number of them that can actually, add benefits, and they're affordable. They're actually really affordable, where you can say, okay, we want to sell this item, or we want you to show up on time or in the right uniform, or whatever it may be. We want you to complete these training modules, and they'll earn points that can then be used for, and there's a wide variety of methodology to this. It could be points, it could be, dollars, it could be whatever it is, but it literally is everything from help to pay back student loans, to Uber Eats to their, Netflix membership, to gym, to you name it, and it's out there. One that I am not a paid representative of this company. They are not paying me to say this, but I really like Honor Roll, and I can, it's just like it sounds, ONAROLL. I really like their platform because it does, it actually rewards the behavior that the employer chooses to reward, and allows for a wide variety of benefits. So in some ways, it kind of gamifies getting people to sell the things you want, or do the things. Thank you, Lauren. To do the things you want. I believe the company was started by a former Starbucks strategy guy or something like that. So it's really geared towards the restaurant industry. There's another one called Prize, with a Z or with a Y, not an I, that I think is kind of cool. So, do the research on these things, go do the demos, look at what they have, and compare prices. I think that for the folks that, don't want what I fondly call grandpa's benefits, I think that this generation of workers will really appreciate you meeting them where they are, with benefits and rewards that are going to be attractive to them. So, Aaron, why don't you jump in for a sec and talk a little bit about training and what you're seeing in the training and adult learning world out there?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. So in the learning and development space, we've seen, just since our last predictions, a boom in technology, and significantly in the AI space. Just the artificial intelligence and where it's gone, and how you really can get information on anything whenever you would like. I'm not going to spend much time on that, but I did want to point out that the growth has been phenomenal in that space, and that has helped make learning for our industry, and also all industries, much more accessible, much more available and affordable. And the quality of training has improved, and it has speed up knowledge and learning transfer for topics, particularly for compliance, for your menu knowledge, for safety, anything tactical, processes, procedures are really benefiting from this type of training. Where I think we are going to go in the rest of this year and beyond is really a focus on, we can say, soft skills or people skills. As technology increases, we and the generations that are newer in the workforce don't have as many conversations. The communication skills may not be the same as what, we're not all on an even playing field with that. So there was a study out, and although it's not specifically for the restaurant industry, it was from intelligent.com. It was a survey of employers who gave feedback on the biggest, during job interviews, what did they observe from recent college graduates? So number one is struggle with eye contact. So who thought that was going to be the number one, which it really does align with some of the things I'm seeing and learning. A lot of these things that may have been what we knew at one point, and it was what we were taught. Now a lot of it is, it's just not the same focus. Also, unreasonable compensation, just really what is reasonable, trying to get that for recent college grads. Also, dressed inappropriately or professionalism, the language, if you're serving others or working with other people, so there's lots of just interactive. How do you come across? What is your body language saying? That seems to be a big focus in our industry and all industries right now. And how do you teach that? It's not always easy to teach that using your learning system that is teaching you your recipes. So it can be done, but it seems to be more of where we're going with our focus, because if you're struggling with your body language and what words to use, it's very difficult to handle guest complaints. for example, or to give great service in the way that you may want to. So that seems to be a big topic.
I couldn't agree more. And I will tell you, we'll get to this towards the end, but our Navigator program does have some really good, and our Learning Center has some great videos on some of these things, like resolving guest complaints and, having great shift meetings and all kinds of things like that. So we'll slip on to the next December 2020 or 2023 for 2024 prediction, which was around development. So Lauren, you predicted that development was going to slow to a crawl. So looks like you were right.
Yes. So we're still seeing a lot of things, unfortunately, restricting, I think, the growth that is pent up to match demand and consumer demand. So I think one of the things we have to acknowledge is that there may be a slowdown of sales in certain segments of the restaurant industry, but as a whole, the industry is still growing. And so what is similar to 06 to 09, you will not see a massive contraction in this space, but rather what we would call flatline sales. And that's still considered 3% annualized growth plus, right? So one of the things we benefit from as an industry is the space growing with population, right? The demand just is going to kind of keep going up and up and up. And indeed, certain segments in the restaurant industry are doing better than others, right? Just because they're better positioned to value present to the consumer, whether that's fast casual and limited service or down to QSR, even though I would argue QSR is having a little bit of an issue right now with taking too much price and kind of impeding into that value prop that is actually the lower end of fast casual. Now, all that said, there is still growth happening. There is pressure for growth, but we are still facing extremely low vacancy rates for available commercial real estate. So retail space is at an all-time low for vacancies. In some markets, it's below 3%, but generally across the nation, it's below 4%. So what that's doing is a lack of available real estate is driving rents up quite high in major markets all over the United States and even secondary markets. You couple that with a virtual stall on lending of all types for massive M&A deals over $100 million all the way down to small town America. It's very hard to see restaurant brands growing right now. You've got to do it on cash. You're paying too much for rent. And that's assuming you can even find a space. So those pressures are still existing. And I actually thought that we would see a little bit of loosening on debt and that interest rates would kind of get better and banks would settle into the new normal and start lending. That doesn't seem to actually be the case. I think we're seeing a lot of the same stuff. So I was fairly pragmatic yet optimistic, which I think is sort of me in a nutshell, but I don't think we're there yet, right? We're not really going to come out of this contraction on growth. Now, it's just two really competing forces right now. So lots of push towards growth, just not a lot of available resources with which to do the growth. So what is the result? I think some things that we're seeing are some really innovative trends around use of space. So shared spaces, like where, you're using like the space for two different concepts or you're co-branding. We're seeing a lot of lean into what we would call non-traditional spaces or locations, bigger than just thinking like airport stadiums and arenas, hospitals and universities, colleges. We're seeing a lot of really bizarre and kind of unique and creative ways to execute brands, whether it's, mobile units again, right? Which most brands would think of that as being an early step. Now it's sort of being viewed as a possible execution for interim use and interim sales growth. Lots of pressure on catering, and demand for catering is not necessarily going down as we're continuing to see some pressure for people going back to office and more formal settings. Those budgets remain unaffected, right? So a company who needs catering for clients or for their employees still needs catering. So that also offers better margins to a lot of restaurants. So lots of pressure on catering. And I think it's going to continue to see, some price wars in and around third-party delivery. So some pressures on price and fees. And that is also a regulatory issue, right? So as we're seeing the delivery space kind of cool off a little bit, one of the things that's happening is the FTC is reviewing all manner of fees in the industry, whether it's the service fee on your bill in the restaurant, or it's a delivery fee that isn't clear to the consumer what that fee goes to. So lots of really interesting pressures in this space, which still were in the same result, which is it's slowing down, unfortunately. I guess the good news is for restaurants is, again, we're not contracting as an industry in a massive way, the way other industries will through this economic period. And the demand is latent. It's there. And so that will, I think, result in some price normalization and overall recovery for the space as we continue through the rest of 24.
So what are your thoughts on private credit?
I think that's the new hot term. So if you hear that buzzing around, private credit can be any number of things, but it's shorthand for debt that's not formalized through a bank, right? So you may see that through debt in like kind of crowdfunding vehicles. You may see that materialize in ways where you are going out to your friends and family to borrow for the company's growth. And so let's say you find that great space and you want to sign the lease, but you don't have a bank who will underwrite the construction line of credit, or the construction line of credit is like 18% plus, which seems market right now. You can go out and source that debt from private lenders. That can be high net worth individuals, family offices. It could be a crowd raise, friends and family, whatever. It seems to be the workaround that I'm seeing most commonly right now, at least in smaller brands and, multi-unit franchisees in some cases. I don't know that that's really the case for larger markets yet, but we'll see. But it could be the workaround. It could be the workaround. And then I think banks will come back to the table when they see that those deals are happening. Listen, the thing to remember here, and I'm going to quote Dune, one of my favorite books and movies, the spice must flow, right? Like these deals have to happen. Money's got to move. Demand's got to be met in some fashion. And private credit seems to be having a golden hour right now, where, you can go get a 9-10% loan from a family office that understands your space, or from an angel investor right now, where it might cost you 12 or 13% at SBA, for example.
Yeah, that's great insight. I really appreciate that. So up next is our marketing prediction from earlier this year. And this would normally be handled by our CMO, Lauren Barish, who is currently out on leave with the newest member of the Full Course family, which is little Stella. So we are going to talk about marketing as a team. So the marketing prediction that we originally had was that brands are going to compete on emotion, not function, which I think still holds true, but we're kind of shifting our language to say creating value as a brand, partly because of all of the value stuff that's happening right now. Do we still think that loyalty is, job one? 100%. And one of our observations about how we can best manage creating value as a brand is around kind of that crossover with marketing and operations to kind of come up with ways that they can do LTOs or value menus. What can you do to get people in the door? I'd really like to hear from James and maybe Lauren around kind of how can ops and marketing partner together?
Lauren, you want to kick that off, or you want me to?
Yeah, I'll
jump in
go
here?
first. Okay, so I'll take sort of the landmine here, which is there's been a lot of press around price. First, it started with a massive backlash against Wendy's for implementing dynamic pricing, and there was an unfortunate article written by someone. I don't want to quote the news, but basically what they did was they tried to equate it to surge pricing. And I think if you are familiar with actually what dynamic pricing is, it's actually more closely modeling your price offering to meet the demand in the marketplace. And that can be regional demand, it can be time, it can be place, it doesn't matter, right? It's just this concept of you might pay $12 for a water in the middle of a desert, but you're going to pay $2 if you're, going through a drive-through, right? So it's not designed to price gouge customers in any way, shape, or form, but it is one of many tools that we lack in the restaurant industry to appropriately protect profit margin in a restaurant after we already understand food costs, labor costs loaded for prime, profit margin gets you to price, right? And so it's a little more complicated, as we know, in the restaurant industry, where you don't really have great ways to quantify the labor going into something and also the food costs. Even, as an industry, we're notoriously not accurate at calculating actual food costs with the good and regular inventory. That said, price has become a hot topic. And one of the reasons for it being a lightning rod in the restaurant industry is the old adage, people have got to eat. And when we see inflationary pressures pass through food costs, pass through higher labor costs and affect price, and we see that across the entire industry, the inflation weary consumer is going to push back when the value proposition does not match price. Okay. So one thing to understand is, yes, you can flow through all of those additional inflationary pressures as a restaurant operator to the consumer and take price. Cool. But you also have to make sure you are not messing up your value proposition. Now, this is where operations comes in, right? Because, and I want to hand this over to James with this sort of tee up, is if you're in quick service restaurants, you are going to get more blowback on taking price. And that's exactly what's happening right now, because that value proposition is quick, fast, right? And available, like everywhere. That's the idea, right? So if you take too much price, you're not going to deliver on that value prop to the consumer. If you take too much price in fast casual and limited service and don't continue to deliver on the customer experience, even nominally, you're going to get pushback. And you're going to hear it in ways like the value's not there, the size is wrong, the portion is wrong, and you may not have even changed the portion, but the perception is reality, right? But they're feeling it in the value prop of the delivery of high quality food for a reasonable price with a nice service environment, right? And this obviously trickles all the way over into full service dining as well, where that experience is actually more likely than not going to be what's driving the commitment to eat in that environment. So if you fall down on service, all the complaints are going to come in. But what's tricky for an operator to understand is it's more often than not a complaint about the food and the portion and the return on the investment for the dollars spent, and less on the experience, if that makes sense. Like psychologically, that seems to be what happened. I'll let James kind of weigh in on this, because I don't think it's as easy as just getting price right and making sure your portions are appropriate. I think you really have to be delivering and what I would love to say, love bombing on customers right now. And it doesn't matter what segment you're in, but James, please, your point of view on this.
Thanks for the tee up. From an operator's standpoint, one thing we have to do is, and for all the operators on the call and for all the marketing folks on the call, y'all know this sort of somewhat problematic dynamic. Some do great at this, and the exchange of information and sort of the thought process of bringing out new items, LTOs or whatever it is, and making sure that operations is teed up for success, and operations tees the marketing initiative up for success. But the communication between the two, the teams have really got to get on the same page. You got to know what your guests want. Part of the marketing, communication and really putting your new LTOs out there is to try to attract guests in a way, frequency and such. But are you going to be trying to put out something that's overly complicated to the operations team, so it then slows down the back of the house and then affects the guest in front of them, so on and so forth? So there's a lot that's going on here. It's not just as simple as just throwing out a new LTO or throwing out a new rewards program or throwing out, saying, hey, we've got a new value menu item or a bundle or this, that, and the other. It's really getting everybody on the same page on on what it's going to look like, not only from a marketing perspective out into the world, but also how is it going to be received from a guest perspective when the interaction happens at store level. So really look into bringing out something that's not going to overly swamp the efforts of the back of the house, as well as being able to make sure that this food service is there and it's going to be attractive enough from the standpoint of really driving that emotional response of, FOMO, fear of missing out. You really want to get those guests engaged, but it's got to be a dual purpose between marketing and operations overall.
And I know we've talked a little bit about value, and Lauren, I know you just wrote an article about Burger Wars and what would you pay for a burger, kind of that thing. And I'm willing to pay for it, but we make great burgers at our house. So, but I'm curious about value, right? Because what does it really mean? And I want to get Paul and Aaron on this one and just kind of say, what do you think about when you think about value, Paul? What's important to you?
That there's not a disappointment in the experience that I have with me and my family. So it's the value of what we're trading our money for versus competition. And also the world's gotten used to ordering in. It's not as frequent that we all go out anymore. And so it's another challenging piece on the value, because you generally would think that items aren't going to come to you as a delivery item. It's not going to be as good as what you'd find in the restaurant, just because of packaging and just how it goes. And so it's that value is reliant on the restaurant, on the delivery. There's just all these different pieces that go into it. It makes it that much harder, I think, to find great value in meals out there, because on top of that, the cost and the price are higher. So for me, it's just that balance of the price and the experience and how well it was executed.
Yeah, no surprise you're a people guy. How's my experience? Aaron, what about you?
So I didn't know you were going to ask this, but I think that's great, because we've actually in my home have had many discussions about this over the last few weeks. I have a graduating high school son, and the way we view value is very different. He will basically measure and weigh whatever he gets. Like, he wants quantity. He, of course, has some expensive taste as well, but he is all about quantity. So he follows the headlines to where he has told me about some of the brands before I've even had a chance to read about them, who have cut portion sizes, or he follows this. It's really important to him, which cracks me up. However, of course, on the flip side, that's very expensive. And if we're all eating together, my husband and I and my daughter are much more less portion, more about the quality. So we're constantly having these debates on what's worth it, because of how expensive going out to eat has been for our family with growing children who, we need that convenience sometimes. So it's a struggle. And I think our motivation changes constantly. Sometimes it's the convenience. Are we going to pay a fee? Sometimes it's really not worth paying double for what we're going to get if we just can go pick it up. So I think we all struggle with that, but it's definitely, with our growing family, it has been tough and a topic of conversation.
To say though, I think the fact that your son is 6'7" might be the reason that he's looking for larger quantities of food. He's a big young man.
Yes, but he needs to get another job if possible. Yeah, to do that.
Lauren, you are the author of the Burger Wars LinkedIn posts that got so much attention. What are your thoughts on this?
Apparently burgers are a lightning rod. It was like one of the more viral posts I've ever put up, which was insane. Yeah, I mean, again, this is like that nebulous area. So, in the last like 10 to 15 years, we've seen this sort of emergence of the gourmet or better burger segment into sort of the fast casual space. So, I am guilty of paying probably $12 to $14 for a burger that is just like lights out and has like, yes, I've bought a truffle burger before. Yes, I've bought all kinds of weird burgers, because I can appreciate that type of innovation. This is what I do for a living, right? But I don't know that that segment is going to fare very well unless there's something additional to the service and the offering and the value prop, right? So for example, like I went into a burger joint the other day and I gladly paid $14 for the burger because $4 of it went to support the Giving Kitchen. Right? Mission and value alignment there, which was something we scream about brands all the time. You want to get a consumer to show up and be super loyal to your brand, be very clear about what you stand for, right? In other cases, I'll pay for that burger because it's the burger that's at the brewery and it's just a need. Like I'm having beers, I need a burger, we got to eat dinner, it's right there. Yeah, it's $11. Is it worth it? No, like in an open economy, no, but in that environment, the value proposition works, right? So there's going to be, I think, some blowback on some of these better burger brands. And I'm not trying to call anyone out, but I think it's pretty well known right now that BurgerFi is looking for, is having some issues and is facing some contraction and closed some stores and is rumored to be looking for a buyer. And that's a perfect example of what we're talking about. But similarly in QSR, there's been so much negative press about the cost of a Big Mac. And to the extent that economists, almost tongue in cheek, use the Big Mac index as a sign of consumer behavior and inflationary pressures, because it's been such a staple of the American diet for so long, in that value play that's on the lower end, right? Where it's fast, quick, and affordable. And unfortunately, I think these have become lightning rods for the consequences of inflationary pressure on consumer spending and on consumer behavior, maybe a little bit unfairly, right? And not to single out any one brand in particular, but the issue is still the same. There's only so much price you can take in QSR before someone goes, forget it, I'm going to go to a craft burger place, pay $2 more and have prime grass-fed beef. And they're a little too close, because interestingly enough, I don't know that fast casual has taken as much price as QSR did. And I think a lot of that is driven by just accuracy of data and just sort of trends in their respective spaces. And I'll just say it, I think fast casual has always been very locked into its value proposition, where it's like good food, quality food delivered with decent service, maybe not a lot, but it's still a fairly price sensitive consumer, right? So I don't know what's going on in QSR, but they're certainly on a full scale retreat. Like what we're seeing a lot of with the brands is, now remember, a lot of QSR is franchised units and those franchisees control price. I think a lot of people forget that. It's not that fast casual isn't franchised as well, but just remember that your local chain restaurant may not actually have corporately controlled pricing. It may be the local operator. That said, we are seeing a lot of franchisors put out maybe not a full-blown value meal or value menu, but it's like a doorbuster where like, okay, until the end of the year, we're serving this like family meal and it's only $20 to feed 4 people, like those types of plays where they know it's maybe a break even or a loss leader, but they're still bringing back that loyal customer, and hopefully they're buying drinks with that or a dessert, and maybe they'll come back during the week on their lunch break, right? So lots of interesting stuff going on right now, and we're testing the price sensitivity of consumers in the different buckets of the restaurant industry, the different segments.
Yeah, I think this is, oh, go ahead, James, I'm sorry.
I think it's important to also say, or also sort of state, in addition to what you're saying from a franchisor or a franchisee relationship, franchisees are dictating the price, but it's also regionally inflated, or pressures in certain regions are causing the market sensitivity to be, ratcheted up. So I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that, something that's going to cost $8 in, Tennessee or somewhere in Tennessee might not be the same, or relatively the same price point as something that would be in New York City. And usually the people that are really going on the hype of, oh, it's a $15 burger, and they're referencing New York City, but not really stating they're referencing New York City. That's where you start getting into some of these problems where people are getting upset. But just take into account the market, the available dollars being spent or being able to be spent. What other factors are really compounding that inflationary aspect. It's pulling dollars out of the usable incomes of folks, as well as what, the cost of this really hitting the store at the store level, what those things are being transferred to the guest.
Yeah. So next prediction that we had, and this one I think is probably going to go fairly quickly because, again, you were right. So Lauren, talk a little bit about real estate. Fierce competition for space. I think we all know that is the case, and it's tough out there.
Yes. Again, super, super, super low vacancy rates in major markets. Something I did not mention earlier is we're seeing an uptick in interest in development strategies around secondary and tertiary markets. So you may not have ever thought about going to Charlotte before, or to Knoxville, or to Birmingham, or to Huntsville, but you're seriously considering it now, because some brands are looking for food deserts too to pop into, where they can get some alignment to the brand's growth and find a new customer base. Again, I think the really smart brands understand this is not going away. So if you're not working actively with your franchisees to help come up with these alternative real estate development strategies, making concessions and development agreements to expand the appropriate real estate picture and or the duration of the agreement, I don't know that bodes well for the brand's overall growth. I think you need to kind of meet people where they're at. This isn't easy for corporate growth. It's certainly not easy for franchisees, and it is equally as bad for the independents, which, let's not forget, that's the overwhelming majority of our industry is actually independent. As we're sitting here talking about all these things, we have a tendency to view them through the lens of the chains because that's what's always in the news. But the reality is that, we're 2-to-1 independent to chain, and even more so overwhelmingly single unit. So for that lone operator out there, that independent operator, these are very difficult things to figure out if you don't understand them. And I think from where we sit as seasoned operators and investors, we don't want you to make those mistakes. We want to help, which I think, obviously, Lisa, that's one of the reasons we do a lot of coaching and have education through our nonprofit and the foundation around these types of issues. Like, how do you navigate very tough real estate market and understand what an appropriate percentage your occupancy should be at, right? Like, we like to rule of thumb that at 10%. And I see a lot of brands, even established brands, bumping that occupancy percentage up to like 15, 17% of sales, and kind of taking the hit, thinking in the short run, it'll wash out in the portfolio. And while that may be true, I don't know that that's healthy for most emerging brands. And for the overwhelming majority of restaurateurs out there, again, who are independent and maybe operating a single unit, that's a very bad idea, in my opinion. Like, you just need to keep figuring out how to make the unit level economics work, because I will tell you, if you make a bad real estate decision, you can't unring that bell, right? Whether it's the wrong location or the wrong structure. And, I will just say it, landlords have the upper hand right now. They are demanding really tough, really onerous clauses on lessees, including double personal guarantees and, being extremely aggressive on rent escalation, on penalties for default, et cetera. And so all those things considered, they are very treacherous waters right now. Ask for help. If you are not represented by a competent restaurant broker, go get one, because you don't pay for that when you're leasing a space. The landlord does in the deal. And it's very important that you have someone who understands these types of industry norms to help negotiate on your behalf. And the last thing I will say on this, and this is not just because I am an attorney, like, go and get a lawyer, get a really good commercial real estate broker and a really good commercial real estate lawyer who can negotiate your lease for a flat fee. They will catch the things that are market. They will catch the things that you can push back on. They will give you insider information on how landlords act in these situations, especially if they're one of the larger players in the industry.
Very good. Well, thank you for that, Lauren. That was awesome. James, I know you have to get on a plane. So I'm going to go to you next with operations. So what you predicted back in December, food cost fluctuations continue. And, clearly that was correct. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now.
Well, I think what we're seeing is that many restaurants that have been taking price have really seen the price ceiling that they've reached. Their somewhat elastic bandwidth has really gotten to more inelastic, and the value proposition of their menu offerings is really sort of starting to show that they can't take necessarily price much longer. We see a lot in the National Restaurant Association, that the overall spend and revenue is still in positive territory over, potentially over $1 trillion. But what we are starting to see too, though, is a retraction in frequency and guest counts in our locations. You've got to be very cognizant of that as you're looking at your trends in profitability. Taking price helped, as I think a lot of restaurants were taking price to help combat the profit margin erosion. But as people are starting to retract the frequency of purchases, or they're trading down from something that they used to be able to get on a normalized run rate, they're trading down because they don't have as much expendable income on those items. You're starting to see that frequency get eroded. So when you're looking at your numbers, really look at how both of them are reflected on your, not only against your profit margin, but again, on the frequency and number of people coming into your restaurant. You're starting to see that erode away. You might start really thinking about, okay, do I need to make an adjustment on some of my pricing? Do I need to have put some new offers and highlight some new offers that have a better profit margin and push it in that direction? Can I reduce my price in some of the areas? You don't have to take a price decrease per se on your menu if you're trying to help with your overall profit margin, but you do need to protect. And you can, put out more aggressive loyalty offers to increase frequency. There's a lot of different methodologies for doing it, but you really just want to make sure you're keeping up with the folks that are coming through the doors, and know your numbers. They're there for a reason. And what you're measuring, you can improve upon. If you're not measuring it, you're not keeping up with it, then it's going to be very difficult to address it.
What do you see for the rest of the year?
I see a lot of some pricing wars coming up to a degree. I think there's going to be a lot of competition, and there's going to be a lot of play with marketing spend, pushing more towards getting people in the doors. Either they're going to boost their loyalty proposition, they're going to put more aggressive offers to try to get profit margin back from third-party deliveries by pushing people towards their websites. But overall, I think that there's definitely going to be some adjustments in overall spend. And that's going to end up compounding on the frequency aspect of things. So I don't think we're going to get away from that until potentially the end of the year, or maybe into the new year, unfortunately.
Into the beginning of 2025. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish we had better news, but I agree with you on that. And I know, James, one of the things that you referenced was from Black Box Intelligence. Certainly recommend you Google them if you don't know them. They have some great industry data, and just do some really cool stuff. They have a quarterly webinar that you can go and see, that just gives you kind of a state of the industry, and those guys do great work. So I would definitely recommend that. The NRA, the Restaurant Association, also does a state of the industry. I definitely recommend, if you can get a hold of those webinars, and I do believe they're online on their websites, you can certainly check those out and kind of see what the economists and the guys in the think tanks are saying about it as well.
Yeah, I think
James,
the next slide.
Okay.
I think the next slide actually shows the sales and traffic growth.
there you go. Yeah.
And so there's some links in here too, that will also be on our website, but as I think as Lisa was saying, there's a lot of different sources, and some of the sources are skewed towards maybe not where the set industry is at. They're segmenting some of the information to paint a picture of positivity and whatnot. And I think that's good. You don't want to start on a negative conversation, but realistically, you've got to have good data inputs in to be able to effectively make some hopefully good decisions on either price adjustments, what you're purchasing, looking for options in your product offering. Let's say your beef supplier, if you have another beef supplier that can provide you with equal quality, maybe a little bit less margin because they're closer to where you're purchasing from instead of getting from across the country. There's a lot of different pressures. It's just really trying to take and look and dissect this data to make sure that you're addressing those issues or opportunities.
Yeah, and to James's point, I just want to highlight, bold, underline, italics this statement. Make sure you're looking at comp data for your segment of the industry. There is a wildly different thing happening in QSR than fine dining than in limited service right now. And again, it's all back to that value proposition. Generally speaking, fast casual and limited service weather these types of economic pressures way better than any other segment. It just is what happens. Consumers trade down from casual dining. The very bottom of the fast casual consumer trades into QSR. If safe flight, James. And so there's a little bit more stability in fast casual, just as one example. That said, when you see news reports on this, they tend to be either industry-wide numbers or they'll pick a segment that's doing particularly bad. And it tends to, I don't know, just paint a very grim picture. But that said, in addition to Guest XM, Black Box, Technomic also just adjusted its forecast for this year. This was breaking news as of yesterday. They initially had a forecast, I think, above 5%, about 5.3% growth for the industry as a whole, again, across all segments this year. And literally just yesterday downgraded 1.5 points. So it's now sitting at a 3.8% year over year increase for the entire industry, right? So I think what's generally happening is they're seeing the rebound happening, but it's going to be soft for the rest of the year. They're not super bullish on there being a massive double-digit kind of recovery at some point. I think that's what's happening. So in any case, just wanted to double down on what James was saying and say, pay attention to the segment, watch the whole industry, great, but certainly pay attention to your segment.
Thanks, Lauren. I will say we're going to go over a few minutes today, but it's going to be well worth it. Why don't we flip to the next prediction? Because we're going to go totally on the other side. Our original prediction was around tech fees having to go. Still true. Tech fees got to go. But we've kind of updated our second half of the year to AI tools for better efficiency. And this is going to be around operations. And Paul, you've had a lot of opportunity to work with this. So if you have the extra few minutes to stick with us a little bit after 4 o'clock, you're going to find this to be it's going to blow your mind. So Paul, talk to us a little bit about using AI in operations.
Sure. Thank you so much. So highlighting a little bit what Erin spoke to earlier, I certainly think we're going to see more AI used throughout the system, like as a system-wide level. But I think one of the benefits that we're going to start to see where AI has advanced so much recently, just leaps and bounds gains, is for managers using it or leaders in restaurants using AI for their personal tool. As an example, we all know that newer managers generally have a challenge with confrontation or they don't want to have difficult conversations. You can build in a prompt to ChatGPT to have a realistic dialogue and a conversation back and forth where you can set up whatever the scenario might be, and also build into the prompt where the AI system will give you feedback on your tone, your language, what you said. and perhaps some ideas of what you could have said differently. And then also what some follow-up items and tools could be to help keep that conversation going forward. So we're now going to see where managers can have that their own, own best tool, if you will, in their pocket. On top of that, being able to understand your data, your numbers. A lot of newer managers don't necessarily understand where their numbers come from or what their numbers mean or their data. And so being able to simply ask, AI, hey, what does this mean? Or how do I solve for X? Certainly going to be, I think, a big boost to learning and support for, lots of operators in the field for sure.
So you think that somebody could go in and say, my food cost is high, my protein or my beef or my chicken or whatever, what should I do? I mean, I'm not the strongest ChatGPT person, but how would that work? That's actually really cool if you can do that.
So there's a couple different ways, right? So you can ask a simple straight line question and get a straight line answer, but also there's an iterative process that you can do through prompting. So you can kind of ask questions back and forth with ChatGPT, like, how do I make the question better? How do I make this prompt better? And it's all about making the best prompt that you can so that you're making the tool work the best it can for you. You can even have it ask you 5 or 6 questions about each of your prompts to iterate it to get to the best piece. The first couple times you do it, it might take a little bit longer, but as you start using it, you can get some pretty dialed in answers. But it's like anything, right? It's a tool. You have to have the human behind it, to utilize it and to use it. So it's a great tool to use, but it doesn't replace, that human being by any means.
Yeah, I think, the sample that you showed me about having a challenging conversation, Susie's late to work all the time. How do I move forward with talking with her about it? I thought I was actually really impressed with how it basically went through kind of the accountability formula that you would use in order to get to change behavior. It was really remarkable. And we're going to have you do like a whole webinar on this coming up soon, because I think as we start to think, I think a lot of people think that the AI is just going to be around like technical things, right? Like, how do we use it for training, or how do we use it to, write fill in the blank, a letter, a form? How do I do this? But really, there's more that you can use it for around just day-to-day management, operational, like excellence. So I think that's really, really cool. And I'm glad that we kind of brought this to light. We do have we're 2 minutes over, but we've been answering questions in the chat along the way in the Q&A section. But if anybody has any questions here at the very end, what can we answer for you? And if you see there's a QR code. If you want to book a call with us, learn more about what we do and how we may be able to help you, please use that QR code and book a call. Anybody else have any other questions? And I saw some of the questions and comments along the Q&A. We appreciate y'all for paying attention and doing all the things. It's awesome that you come. Save the date, Wednesday, July 18th, which is my daddy's birthday, at 3:00 Eastern time. We are going to be talking with Roger David, who is the CEO of Gold Star Chili right out here in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where I'm from, and just really learn about how they built their company and grew it from a family business to actually being a very large regional brand. So I think you'll really enjoy hearing from Roger. He's terrific and a really smart operator. So I think that'll be a really good one. I think that's all unless there's more slides, I think we're all done. If you haven't had a chance, sign up for Navigator. That's on our website. It's our subscription. It gives you access to everything in our library and some live training on a monthly basis. We appreciate you for coming to join us. Thanks for sticking around, those of you that could, and we will see you next month. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.